Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of HR Tech Chat. I am very, very excited to be speaking with Tom Cielak today. And I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, Tom. I've never actually asked you.
That's right. Cielak, good.
Excellent, excellent. Tom leads HR operations for a global asset management firm. And he's been in the space for a while. He and I met several years ago, each of us in a former professional life, in the same HCM space. And we've had many really interesting conversations over the years, and recently reconnecting earlier this year, just around, what is the impact, significance, essentiality, or criticality of HR technology to HR leaders, these sorts of things. We've talked about employer culture lately, and all these very pressing current themes in our space. And we thought, you know what? We should probably do a podcast, an episode of HR Tech Chat, and just kind of, if we can in any way potentially impart some knowledge, or bring something out there to the market that other people can chew on and think about to help bring us all forward or evolve. So thanks for joining us, Tom. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I know that you have this concept of the HR technologist that's fascinating to me. Maybe you could delve into that a little bit.
Sure. So thanks for having me, Brent. Like Brent said, my name is Tom Cielak. I run HR operations for a global asset management company called Allianz Global Investors, based here in New York. Throughout my career, I started in consulting. I've done a lot of work in the HCM technology space. So a lot of years of experience dealing with different vendors in the space, and really like drive HR technology through companies to make sure that they utilize that technology, engage their employees.
Yeah. And that's really, you can't do HR without technology. Well, you can, but it's very difficult. It would require just many hands. Maybe you can get into that a little bit. How is the technology's relationship to HR? How has that evolved? We don't have to blow the ocean here, but where are we today? I mean, versus say 10-15 years ago even.
So when you think about like HR technology 10-15 years ago, very like old antiquated systems, really wasn't there to really drive process efficiency. It was more there to like process data, make sure people got paid. But you've really seen over the past, let's say 15 to 20 years, number one, that the HR technology space has really started to evolve, okay? So realistically, back 10-15 years ago, it was really just processing data. Now it's really becoming an engagement tool, a productivity tool, really basically allowing like employee engagement, driving employees to a platform, really becoming an efficient part of the organization. In addition, like a lot of data analytics have come out of these brand new systems, really like driving like people data analytics and people metrics throughout the organization. So it's been a significant evolve from like 15-20 years to old mainframe systems to really now technology systems. Probably like 10-15 years ago, you never really thought about having a technology skill set in HR or a mathematical skill set in HR. It was more of a customer service focused or more of a process focus. But realistically now, those really need to come together, and really HR people, at least many of them, they need to really understand what HR technology can do. Mm-hmm. And so you're really starting to see like that, IT does not drive HR technology anymore. You're really seeing an HR person or HRIS analyst really in the department driving that technology, implementing that technology, being able to really take the business rules that they know from an HR process standpoint and really drive them through the system. So technology in HR has really come a long way, and those technology skills really need to evolve. And I think that's one of the things that is starting to happen more and more. You're starting to see more technologists in the HR space, even though we're not fully there yet. But I've seen like the most successful HR departments really have that critical role of like an HRIS analyst or a senior HRIS analyst to really drive and utilize the system. These brand new systems have like over, let's say like 2,000 great features. They can really drive efficiency. The issue is that if you don't have a technologist in the actual space or someone that really understands what the technology can do, you're not really getting the biggest bang for your buck. So instead of just basically, let's say, processing payroll, like you really want to basically drive that data. You want people to be able to go in there and have like a one-stop shop to like do some of the HR business processes, and really to basically have all those back-end calculations that you used to never have that can actually be done in the system. You do see with these new, software as a service models, like you can do everything on your own. You don't need to call the vendor like you used to basically start creating any back-end process. You have access to all that. So it really, really, when you think about getting the biggest bang for your buck, like you got to move beyond the old, like just payroll process or the benefits enrollment to really see what an HR technology can do for you.
That's really interesting. There's so much to unpack and what you just shared. There are so many things. So first of all, I think about, okay, well, this is interesting. It's the mirror image of the evolution of our thinking about what HR is all about. Right? In terms of driving employee engagement and productivity and all these sorts of things versus taking care of just sort of the basic necessities of employing people, like making sure payroll is processed correctly and all this kind of stuff, and which is important, but we've kind of moved beyond that. What's really interesting to me, maybe we could kind of bounce off from here. We talked about IT, right? And everybody knows IT is no longer the driver really of enterprise software decisions, but they're still involved. And to me, what you mentioned around being an HR technologist and really understanding the technology and everything that you can do with it, to me that seems that IT could potentially, well, how do we put this? You don't want to leave it to IT maybe to have sort of a final say, or somehow have what would you call that? Is somebody can, they can vote against something. You know,
Veto?
yeah, a veto. Yeah, veto. That was the word I was looking for. And you don't want IT to maybe have veto power over something you want to do in HR that's not going to be possible without embracing a little bit more of the technology that you're using. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit more, the dynamic. Being an HR technologist to me seems as a way to kind of consolidate or to help ensure that democratization of the power centers and making software decisions remain democratized.
Yes, I think, when it comes to sort of HR technology, like I said, this is definitely, it runs so many different processes. We're talking about every HR process that's very complex that a lot of IT people don't realize the actual process or how it affects the people, or really how things work from a compliance perspective with HR. So HR technologists can really bring through like the technology and the compliance and the people side and sort of bring that all together, where it's definitely not like just a standard, technology package that IT just like basically supports, right? There's definitely more than a support function when it comes to these IT, these new HR packages. It's really a thorough understanding of the process and the people and really what it can bring to the table. So I think from my perspective, like, I always have brought IT to the table more from like a user access management, from a single sign-on perspective. But even now, so like, like a lot of things are hosted, the hosted environments there. So like, you don't need IT to do any of the development. Like these new software vendors, they are your IT department. They do your development. You can reach out to them. Like, you could do, they basically do all the data transmissions with your benefit vendor. So the need for IT is like these HR technology vendors, they are your new IT, right? So you're not really definitely stuck in sort of those old school, like most companies don't have their own data center anymore. It's really most stuff is on a hosted environment. So I think it's like understanding that, this is sort of an HR tool to really drive, HR processes and people and engagement. I think the decision needs to stay definitely with HR always, just because it's such a critical piece to sort of your engagement and your people environment, and just making sure that you guys really drive that engagement. You don't want necessarily somebody outside of your department making decisions on your technology, where you're trying to basically utilize that technology to drive employee engagement and data analytics and making sure your processes are done, and whether you could do things on the fly. So I think it's just also like from a networking perspective, like, I think all these vendors out there have like great networks where you can bounce ideas off other HRIS people or, HR technologists in other areas, where IT just doesn't have that total skill set when it comes to bringing that compliance technology and people side together.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to think about, also
Mhm.
just the type of person that's in IT. They have sort of a different outlook, that maybe a little bit of a different interest. They're very, very interested in technology, whereas an HR person has that just sort of an intrinsic interest in
Yeah.
in the people of the organization, right? And that's not a pejorative or anything in either direction, right? And you're making a very good rational argument for that HR person to really stretch their understanding and just understand that they need to understand technology in order to be as influential as possible. You mentioned that, and I love this. You're basically your SaaS provider. That is your IT department
Yeah.
in a sense,
Mhm.
right? That's really interesting. And made me wonder, there's probably some stat out there somewhere that we can find. Like, I wonder how many folks who used to be in IT for just whatever type of organization, how many of them have maybe, you know, migrated to join some sort of software vendor to
Yeah,
work
I'm
on
sure.
it.
Yeah. Like I'm
Yeah,
sure, like, obviously these vendors, like they do the development for you, right? They write the code for you. So I'm sure there were like developers in IT that basically moved to some of these, these SaaS models or these SaaS companies to really start writing that code. I'm sure they have business analysts that sort of bring that together, get the business rules and sort of work with the developers to sort of initiate or implement a lot of those business rules in the development of the software and the coding.
yeah, yeah. Let's switch gears just a little bit. This is obviously all related, but let's talk in terms of the functionality that's available out there,
Yeah.
out in the landscape of all of these HCM technology vendors. Um, what is your take? Obviously there's going to be variations in how one vendor's technology enables you to get something done versus another's, right? But how much, in terms of the big names that are out there, how much variation is there? Have we reached this point where where functionality isn't as much of a differentiator, competitive differentiator as it used to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like you're definitely seeing like the features there. Most of the companies now have a lot of the same features. Okay. Like one thing that I've always looked for is like sort of like a single database. Like to me, like I'm not a big fan of like having interfaces in between HRIS systems, or I like real-time data. So you're starting to see, I think Ceridian was the first one that sort of did the single database. You're
Mhm.
starting to see other ones still obviously, try to emulate that. A lot of them have unified systems where they do some really good work in the background, trying to make sure that there's no hiccups when data moves back and forth. But when you think about like the old technology, most of it was on a mainframe system. You would, enter things in the system and it would go to the mainframe where it would process, and then the data would transfer back. And there was always data translation issues. But you're starting to definitely see like sort of the core processes are done, right? When you think about like payroll and benefits and vacation tracking and
Mm.
time tracking and time rules, like they're becoming pretty standard, right? So you're now definitely starting to see like more unique items come out, like the a self-service, or I shouldn't say
Okay.
self-service, more of like an internet-based, answering system, like robots, Dayforce wallet, like things of that nature, like sort of the more, let's call them unique things, are starting to become a little bit of differentiators within the software. Mobile technology, and like you could basically, they're having like Alexa in some of these apps now. So you're
Mm.
really starting to see like those are the differentiators. At the same time, like what I don't want to happen with these vendors is to sort of lose sight of some of those core processes like payroll and
Yeah.
benefits, right? Because like the last thing you want is they've almost become like sort of the standard, like they just work very well, but you don't want, as new regulations come up, you don't want them to fall short on those things because those still are the core. But technology now has made payroll processing, benefits processing, like, data analytics, that like a lot of that, those dashboards are already built in, so
Mhm.
a lot of them, it's quick to do where you don't necessarily need to like, spend a lot of time doing some of those core processes. So really, like a lot of the vendors are really trying to, they're really trying to differentiate themselves with these brand new things in the market that might be more futuristic.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because that would be interesting, sort of a vicious loop right there. So for instance, we've made so much progress in all this kind of stuff. I think back to I love automobile analogies, right? Back
Yeah.
in the 60s, it was all carbureted, and then they started to add, fuel injection, and that used to be a big deal. This car has fuel injection. That's great. Electronic fuel
Mhm.
injection. It was started off as mechanical, but this
Right.
isn't automobile tech chat. But anyways, the whole
Right.
point being that now everything has that electronic fuel injection, and you know and it's just something they've completely figured out in just about any car, except maybe, I don't know, every once in a while you get one that can't do it, but
Yeah.
but you don't even have to think about it anymore. It'd be terrible if car companies all of a sudden, they were so focused on the new tech, like for instance, autonomous or semi-autonomous driving is that sort of a novelty that only a few vehicles have, like Tesla and a couple of other premium brands, right? It would be terrible if they focus so much on that somehow the electronic fuel injection just sort of
Yeah.
lagged, and maybe with new gasoline blends that are coming out later that they might fail or something like that. So it's the same sort of thing. So now what's interesting to me though is, so companies, so the vendors are competing in terms of these novel new capabilities that
Yeah.
they can offer, right? That's one thing, but is that a compelling enough, like how compelling is that in terms of a competitive differentiators, in your opinion?
I think it depends on what they're trying to roll out and really the demographics of any company, right? So when you think about like on-demand pay, like it definitely focuses more on sort of the manufacturing type environment or people that maybe, more of the blue collar, workforce where, maybe like some companies like financial services, right? Who maybe are more of the the exempt and the higher pays. Maybe that wouldn't necessarily work for you, right? I think
Mm,
when it comes to like differentiating, when it comes to like data analytics and whatnot, like, it depends on like the organization, like are your HR business partners savvy enough to use those analytics and really drive making those decisions? I mean, mobile app is like, when you think about the generations that are coming down the line here, like, the younger generations, like they only know the mobile app, right? They're not going on a browser at some point. Like, so like at some point, like they're going to want to do everything on the mobile app, right? So like they're going to be able to do their performance reviews, their compensation, their pay, their benefits, all on that mobile app. So I think like you're going to see like the best technology companies really start driving that mobile app, and really making it the key driver of how to get information. So I think that's going to be one aspect. In addition, like you're definitely starting to see like a little bit of a social aspect to some of these HCM technologies. Like you'll see like little bulletin boards where you can like put kudos on to like your friends in the organization, et cetera. So it's almost like you really want to like get a way to drive people through to your mobile advice, your mobile app through the HCM software, and like,
mm,
really get them engaged in that software and really make like sort of the technology almost a little bit social, right? I mean, you're seeing a significant integration between work and life, so people basically like, they probably log on to their, HCM app at night, past like 5 o'clock. Like there's really like the work hours are different. People are definitely more, remote as we become like, after COVID, more and more companies are going to be remote. So like they really want to feel connected through these apps. So like there should be a good social, hopefully a good, like I
mm.
think companies should do like a social aspect to these apps where people can really post messages about, projects that they're doing, et cetera. Like, and I think HCM technology companies will continue to expand down the line to include maybe more, complex items when it comes to like maybe executive comp or stock option trading, or really starting to push the envelope to really drive everything into one sort of system.
Yeah, because the more folks you have in the system, the more often, right? The more it's going to achieve for the organization. Yeah, and so we on a previous conversation and this kind of segues into this. We talked about the generations and
Yeah.
and the idea of millennials who aren't really the, the young generation anymore.
Right.
They're in their late 30s and early 40s. But also Generation Z, who I've heard called Zoomers and these sorts of things. And you mentioned the younger generations and their just inclination to do everything, or propensity to do everything via
Mhm.
the mobile device, through the mobile application of whatever the functionality is, right?
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about functionality and its, what its perceived worth is.
Yeah.
To the various generations, the older generation. So you and I think we may both be Gen X. I am very much Gen X, right smack dab in the middle.
Yeah.
Um, and to me, I recall, I remember when there was no internet. And
Yeah.
I do remember when internet happened, and it was really cool, I can't imagine life without it anymore. But except I can I can fathom life without it,
Right.
right? Because we didn't have it. So whereas, millennials but especially Zoomers,
Yeah.
they literally do not know a world where there was not this level of connectivity,
Right.
and also this level of technological capability. So, what are the implications in your opinion for HR or any enterprise software vendor, but focused on HCM, right?
Yeah.
What are the implications of that for these vendors?
Well, I think it's interesting. As the more mature generations start to retire, these mature generations, they've seen the really like the older antiquated systems. They've seen the evolution of technology from like as what we would say probably right now is really, really bad 15, 20 years ago, really complex, to hey, a little bit better, to even a little bit better, to like 2020, it's actually pretty good. Like when you see like these systems are really good, but they're probably really good to these more mature generations because we've seen the really bad, right? So
Yeah.
when you think about these newer generations, like they've never really seen bad technology, right? I mean, like they've always had a mobile phone, they've always had the apps, right? Like think about 10, 15 years ago. Yeah, technology was really good, but we were still going on the browsers. We didn't really have the apps as much as we do now. So for them, like, they don't know what it was really like. Their benchmark is a lot higher than ours was. Okay. So I think what you're going to start to see is like, depending on your HCM software, like they're going to want all the bells and whistles, right off the bat, right? They're like, they don't know what really bad was. So they're continuing to look to the future to be like, if they hear something else from another company or one of their friends' company has something else, they're gonna expect that in the software, right? Like
Mm.
they probably won't even ask you the question like, do you have mobile technology? Can you basically enter your vacation on mobile technology? Can you do dashboards on mobile technology? They're gonna assume that that's there, right? So you're gonna see a difference in sort of like, let's call it the expected business rules to basically just automatically be there. They're not gonna, they're never gonna ask you anything about like, connectivity, or is it internet based, or what can you do on the internet, what can you do on the mobile. They're just gonna assume everything's mobile. So you're gonna start to see a significant shift as these younger generations come up, that everything's going to be based on technology. They're going to want one-stop shops. They're going to want to do everything in their mobile app, from social to pay to Venmo. They're going to want to do everything in that one-stop shop. They're probably going to want to do their banking in the same app at some point, right? So it's like you're going to see a significant drive toward really ease, not only using your technology for ease, but like for convenience, right? They want that convenience.
Yeah, yeah. It's not. It's nobody's asking. Well, let's put it differently. A boomer have asked several years ago. Oh, can I make a phone call, like a regular phone
Yeah.
call on the smartphone, right? Whereas, this is kind of like an extreme example, but just to make the point, a Zoomer would never would never ask that. That's just something you don't
Yeah,
even ask. Of course you can
right,
make a phone.
exactly, right.
Oh, and by the way, I don't make phone calls, I text, right?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, like, I think you're seeing, like, you're starting to see a significant change from like text, like from email to text, right? Like more and more people are texting business, and, like where we used to basically do like these long drawn out emails, everyone's going to text. So I think eventually, like at some point, text will be the main communication method, you know?
Probably,
Yeah.
probably that's, yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. You know, and to the same point, nobody's even wondering, well, a Zoomer is going to
Yeah.
go in there and they're just going to assume that the technology they're getting is going to process payroll correctly every
Yeah.
time in the most efficient way possible. Which, so for a vendor who's and we're talking about once the Zoomers get into positions of leadership and start
Yeah.
being decision makers in the selection of these various technologies. So, that so for a vendor to falter in that area today, that's excuse me, in the not too distant future, that could be potentially just catastrophic and absolutely
Yeah.
destructive to their business.
Yeah, and I think, like, even now, that even though they're not in leadership positions, like they still do drive a lot of the workforce culture. Like, millennials drove a lot of the great changes, like in flexibility, right? So I mean, like, to me, like the millennials and the Zoomers, they're going to drive more different cultural aspects, right? Like they want even more flexibility, but at the same time, like they want a purpose, right? So like, social responsibility is going to be big in these new HCM companies, et cetera, really driving that type of stuff also.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, how effective is it? I just want to get back to this question. How effective really is it, given this new landscape for let me put it differently. What would be the best way for an HCM technology vendor today to differentiate itself or to advocate, let's not say differentiate for itself, but instead advocate for itself in the market to get more eyeballs, more interest, to gain market share? What would, you know, what would be what would be the best way, or what are we seeing? How are they? That's a better question. What are you seeing in that area? How are vendors sort of presenting themselves? Are they talking about their functionality? Is that what they're just fixated on solely, or is it part of a greater mix in the
Yeah.
marketing messaging? Like, what's going on?
I think all these technology companies, obviously they do talk about their technology, but at the same time, like, there's also a big engagement and cultural aspect that you're sort of buying when you buy these platforms, right? Like, you're buying this HR technology to really engage your employees, and also, like, you want to basically have a great culture at your company to, like, get the best workers and the best talent and really retain that. So you're really, like, there's a big push to sort of talk about the culture of these HCM companies and how great their culture is, and they sort of utilize their software as sort of one of the main drivers of the culture, right? So not only are you as a customer trying to really to buy the technology, but I think inherently in the back of your mind, you're hoping to buy their culture also, right? Like,
Mm.
so I think it's very important that these HCM companies have a great culture, that they're really driving some cultural aspects. I mean, when you think about, like, in the early 90s, like, Ultimate Software, they're the one that started the people first thing. I think they were the main driver of that really put employees to the forefront, where they really can really tout, sort of their culture. And they continue to do that. And more companies, more and more HCM companies are really doing that. You're seeing a lot more activity on LinkedIn, like, hey, I got a job at Paylocity. Hey, I got a job at iSolved, right? So you're seeing really in the marketplace, like, hey, congratulations, you're coming. Like to me, it's like, even these, like you'll see people that basically are saying they got an internship, on LinkedIn, which I think is like, we would have never done that like 15 years ago, right? Like nobody cared about our internships, but now it's an opportunity to be like, hey, by the way, like, hey, I'm starting my career. And they're really trying to, like, sort of drive culture. You talk about like Glassdoor, right? I mean, like, I think everybody goes to Glassdoor, and, like, you know obviously you got to take some of the reviews with a grain of salt, but when you have like 3,000 reviews, you're like, that's a good enough review to really like get what the culture is at an organization. And I think, you see organizations where maybe their Glassdoor goes up or their Glassdoor goes down and stuff like that. So I think it's extremely important for, these leaders in these companies to really understand, like, as they start to do these shifts in technology and sort of like, obviously, there's a financial aspect, they're still trying to make money, et cetera. But like that can take a significant toll if like your culture starts to drop, or you're not focused on your culture anymore, because a lot of people are trying to buy that culture too.
Yeah. It, that's the real point right there. I think you really put it very well there. People are buying that culture too.
Yeah.
I think that what I've noticed too with the HCM vendors is that the technology vendors, what they're doing is they're presenting this sort of archetypal, ideal employer culture that
Yeah.
they have themselves, and a lot of them do have that.
Yeah.
And there's also a way to market that message too, right?
Right.
But you think about everybody most people who went into HR, they didn't go to HR because they wanted to be involved in, tedious compliance related things all day long, or
Yeah.
or to be sort of the arbiter and say, some sort of a layoff or a very difficult situation of
Yeah.
having to fire somebody. Although that's all part of the job, it
Right.
absolutely is. But they went into it because they're people,
Yeah.
and they want I'd say most of them want at their core for their organization to be the most it can be from a people standpoint, to have that high level of engagement. So it's a way, I think it's very smart. It's a way for those organizations to kind of maybe even live a little bit vicariously, or that's I would put it a little bit more positively. It's a way for them to aspire. It's inspiration for them.
Yeah.
They can live vicariously through it in the meantime, but it's kind of a motivation to aspire to be that, which is really interesting. It's a great marketing message.
Yeah, I think, also, I think, one thing that you're starting to see, which is actually really good with these technology softwares, is like they're really starting to also address business issues, right? And I think it's, when you think about like the finance department or the marketing department, and they're really involved in the business. So like these technologies should really start to, address business issues, right? Like, so I think it's like, if you can really start to address these business issues, like what are your business issues? Like, are you trying to become more digital? Are you trying to grow your organization? How do these new technologies, fit into your culture and your engagement, but also like, how does it basically help your business and the bottom line from a financial perspective when it comes to the people side of things? And I think that's one thing that has been significantly missing sort of throughout the years. It's been more of a process driven thing, but you're definitely seeing the culture, but you're also now seeing like what are the real business issues that are really, happening right now, especially when it comes to, like, I'll give you an example, like COVID, right? You're going to see more and more companies allow people to work anywhere in the United States, right? So it's like is there a compliance issue that happens with people working all over the place? Yeah. So we want these softwares to be able to do that. But by doing that, you're basically, increasing your talent pool. Like you can hire somebody in like Idaho now that might be the best technologist that might maybe never come in the office. So you're going to see like really these technology companies also start to address some of these significant business issues.
And that's super important, right? This is I actually wasn't expecting us to necessarily get into this today, but I will say that this very much intersects with an idea that a thematic direction of our research at 360 Insights this year, this idea of we call it concrete and abstract HCM. Concrete HCM being all those things that are financially quantifiable, having to do with HCM. How does it, payroll being possibly the most concrete aspect of HCM, although sometimes payroll lives under finance, but it is a number that it's an indisputable number that goes out every week, 2 weeks, or monthly, right?
Right.
But there's a whole employee sentiment thing around that too, right? If you get payroll wrong, good luck, buddy. I mean, you're going to have a big mutiny on your hands very quickly, depending on how large the mistake is. I think it came out from the it was a number. Yes, the Workforce Interest Institute from UKG. They came out with a finding: 49%, near essentially half of employees are willing to tolerate just one, some sort of mistake with payroll.
Interesting.
Um, and they're looking for a new employer after that,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. But bringing it back to what you said, that the vendors focusing on the business impact
Yeah.
of HCM, right? We
Mhm.
need to broaden our understanding, or our concept of what the business impact is of our people, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of it that's sort of very easily translatable to accounting language, or what the accounting think. It's
Yeah.
okay, we expended this much labor, we spent this much on labor expenditure
Right.
for our scheduling. If we get something that's better, more efficient for the technology, we'll save X amount. And that's a productivity gain that we can lob
Yeah.
into the spreadsheet, right? These sorts of things, right? I was having a conversation with someone recently. I do not recall who it was. I talk with so many people.
Yeah.
But anyway, that sounded like a humble brag, and it wasn't, trust me.
Yeah.
But anyway, we had this thought that, what's financially quantifiable now is just what we can see right now.
Yeah.
There could be something that seems completely not quantifiable from a financial standpoint, and it may therefore receive sort of short shrift from financial leadership in organization. But that thing could, in fact, be the trigger for something that does turn into something that's financially quantifiable later.
Yeah.
Maybe even the organization no longer being a going concern because they neglected their employer culture
Right.
for so long.
Right. Exactly.
So, you know, I think we have an excellent opportunity in the HCM market, I think, or the space as a profession, to expand that understanding of what really is the business impact of your
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
In my
That
thought,
makes
yeah.
sense.
And I've had conversations around this, in terms of, you know, seeing HR as a cost to contain. That's been the thing that HR has been for years
Yeah.
just working to get out from under, and instead something to invest in. And I was speaking with someone recently around this idea that, why not literally put your labor costs, like put it in a different column
Right.
in your accounting spreadsheet. So treat it as an asset, treat your people and then all of a sudden they become an asset to invest in. What are your thoughts around this?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think you're right. It's hard to quantify a lot of sort of the cost of HR when it comes to the people, right? I mean, obviously from a payroll perspective and benefits, that's a hard dollar cost. But I don't know if it's really easy to quantify the amount of wasted labor or the amount of disengagement, or realistically, there's always these turnover metrics that a turnover person, cost you $50,000. I don't know if that's really quantifiable when it comes to training. I think, as we basically become more and more technology driven, I think our skill sets are really falling behind. I think hiring the right person is very important. Okay. It's making sure that they fit into what you want, in addition to I heard this recently, instead of having a cultural fit, have a cultural add, some of that adds to your culture in a positive way and stuff like that, which I thought was a very interesting thing. That's the way somebody put it, right? But at the same time, as more and more companies are going through diversity, you see you see a lot of times when you recruit, you're looking for 5 to 10 years of experience of HR operations. They have to work in financial services, but are you better off now quantifying to get bigger bang for your buck, to get somebody that was not in financial services, get somebody that was in manufacturing, bring some of those experiences, get somebody that wasn't in HR operations their whole life. Maybe they were in accounting, maybe they were in marketing for a while, maybe they were in manufacturing operations. So you're going to start to see, like, in order to quantify a little bit about those costs, like, you really do need to get people that have diverse experiences that really try to, like, bring that to the table, so to
Mm,
speak, to really, help, not have this group think, right? Because, like, yeah, if everybody's had the same exact experiences, you're not really getting that additional, like, diversity and experience, diversity in thought, diversity in idea, but it's really hard to quantify some of those soft skills. And I think that if somebody can figure out how to do that, that'd be like a golden ticket.
yeah, it's definitely not going to be. Well, I think it would be somebody who has some sort of a financial background is going to
Yeah,
know
exactly.
exactly how to do that. One thing that's interesting, though, that what you said and it occurred to me is you're absolutely right. It's difficult to quantify. It's next to well, I'm not going to say next to impossible because I don't know enough about this.
Right.
I can't, but it seems to me that'd be very difficult to quantify what's the potential value lost by not doing something.
Yeah.
That to me is just it's too vague.
Right.
Even though it definitely does have an impact. Um, yeah, you can't really. Yeah, I can't imagine trying to put a dollar
Right.
amount to that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too hard. I mean, like, we've been talking, HR people have been talking about this for 20 years and we're still talking about the same issue. So somebody hasn't solved it yet. We're still trying to, but somebody hasn't solved it.
That's that's a great point. And maybe that's a I was just looking at the time. And maybe that's a good place to sort of land. I think we've been talking about these things for a while. They're very important. We still have our work cut out for us to
Yeah.
figure out, how to actually broaden that understanding of the value of people to an organization. Although I do think that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, we're definitely moving in the right direction. A lot of work to do, though. We got to continue to move forward to quantify that. But yeah, we're definitely moving in the right direction with technology and culture and engagement.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Thanks so much, Tom.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
so
you.
much. Yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm sure our viewers will absolutely love it.
Thanks, Brent. Have a great day.
You too. Take care. Bye.